Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's talk about your emotional issues. What's going on with you on the inside, not the outside? We're going to look at the causes, not the symptoms of your issues. Talk about it in our emotions. That's what's going on, which has become maybe a bad word for men, but I think even for women now. We think if we talk about our emotions, if we really get to the root of what's going on, then it's vulnerable, it's gross, people aren't going to like us, which is true in some respect. I mean, there is a way of talking about your emotions that makes you unattractive. And that's how most people do it, because they go most of their life without doing it, and then they start to do it, and people will run away because you don't know how to do it. You haven't processed your emotion in years, and now you're bringing it up as like this emotional upchuck. Yeah, it's going to be unattractive. Let's do it in the correct way. If you don't know what you're doing with women and you just go try to talk with one, it's probably going to be unattractive. So let's learn a few principles of how women work before we interact with them. I think that may be helpful, and that's what we're going to get in today. Read the Rational Male this week. Why did I do it? Well, I think to get some insights on where guys are coming from. Let's face it, Animus Empire is awesome, and we have the greatest view of psychology in the history of the world. But I think there's some weak points too, and I think one of my weak points, I don't know why I say are, one of my weak points is maybe I have a difficult time communicating with guys where they are and what exactly they're going through. So part of reading the Rational Male is maybe to get a better understanding, of what guys are clicking with. So I could maybe click better with them, try to see where they're coming from, and also just to see what's going on out there, what people are talking about in general. I think that's really helpful, and we're already doing it because now I'm going to talk about good parts about the book, what the book needs to work on, not to sound like a fourth grade teacher. Ooh, here's some points you can improve on, but there's some things that the book can improve on. But overall, well, I'm not going to spoil my review of it quite yet, but let's start managing your issue, exactly what's going on. You're not doing things that you want to be doing, or you are doing things that you don't want to be doing. And it's not a question of willpower. Well, it is, but willpower is the result of something else. Willpower is a symptom of a deeper understanding of how your psychology works, and specifically how your emotions work. So let's speak to that key issue so the willpower takes care of itself. Anything else that you want in life, it will tend to take care of itself. That's what we're doing here. Speaking of helping out people, I was driving in my car, listening to the radio. That's what you do when you have a car, which I have now. I haven't had a car in 10 years. And I'm listening to the radio now. Well, I guess if I was on the subway in New York, I could have done something, but I would just read on the subway. I wouldn't listen to things. I don't know. It's just something about having buds in my ears, which is paradoxical that I'm bringing that up now, because I do have earbuds in. So if it sounds like I'm shouting, that's because I have these earplugs in. I mean, there's just this noise from this construction crew outside, and it's kind of annoying. Noise is kind of annoying, so I have these plugs in. But I think I can cut out the background noise in post. Watch me do it with my magic post-production skills. So I was driving in the car, listening to the radio, which is what you do when you drive in a car. And I'm an old man, so I was listening to NPR, KQED, and there was a psychologist, funny enough, speaking at University of San Francisco about the mental health crisis and why more people aren't getting the mental health treatment that they need. And of course, what was his reason? Why are people not getting the mental health treatment they need, according to this professor, the psychologist at University of San Francisco? Of course, it's because of the stigma. There's too much of a stigma around mental health. If there wasn't a stigma that came from somewhere, we don't know, it came from somewhere. And that's why people aren't getting mental treatment they need. And that's why there's a mental health crisis, whether it's the opioids, other kinds of addiction, teen suicide, young girls pulling their hair out, literally, trichotillomania. If it wasn't for that stigma, that's the reason. That's the reason people aren't getting help. Could you imagine if any other industry did that? Could you imagine? You guys know something about me. I used to work in advertising, marketing. I was a copywriter. I couldn't imagine going to an art director and saying, "Oh, we couldn't get the client." Oh, why? Because there's a stigma around advertising. Yeah, no kidding. There's a stigma around advertising. There's always going to be some kind of stigma when it comes to somebody spending money. It's your job to convince them, to show them that what we do is helpful. Look at these past clients. Look at these case studies. Look at this money that we made this past client. This past client who was similar to your business. We made them $1 million, only charged them $50,000. We're going to, hire us. It's essentially it's like creating money out of thin air. That's what you're doing when you're hiring us. But no, the mental health psychologists, therapists, they don't do that. They go, oh, there must be some stigma out there. No, it's not a stigma. The only stigma, if there is one around mental health, the only stigma is it doesn't work. Because right now, psychology, there's no principles for it. It's not even a science. It's just the guys standing around in pretend lab coats, finding correlations that they always infer to be causations. Well, imagine that. You work on a study for 7.5 years. You pour your heart and soul into it. You've written all these grant proposals. And you're probably kind of resentful because you're a smart guy. Well, maybe not if you get into psychology, but maybe you tend to be a smart guy and you don't have a lot of money. So you start to get resentful about it. And you will find causation in the correlation. Oh, you will find it. That's why there's a stigma. Is because, and I mean, nobody communicates it in this way. Nobody goes to therapy and goes, there's just no principles for therapy. But they go to therapy and they realize it's not going anywhere. They realize the therapist doesn't know what he's doing. They see their other friends go to the therapy and, dude, you've been in therapy for 13 and a half years. Why did you just get divorced for the third time? What's going on? This doesn't seem to be working. The stigma is it doesn't work. And there's a stigma around you now because you're going around talking about the stigma without taking responsibility, without speaking directly to the issue. And I wouldn't even have brought this up. I would not have even brought this up, but I was driving to my group therapy, practice what you preach. I was driving to my group therapy, and this was what was playing on. And then I came out of group therapy, turned it back on, and it was the end of the talk. And there was some Q&A, and he was talking about the psychologist who was blaming stigma for people not getting mental health. Now he was talking about this client that he has had for 13 years, probably where I got that 13 years from. This client that he's had for 13 years, and he admits that he hasn't helped him, but this guy's just come up with a bunch of, in a lot of unfortunate circumstances over the last 13 freaking years, and there's nothing I can really do to help except just to accept him. You don't understand depression. You don't understand what at work. You speak of depression in terms of dopamine and serotonin, not principles on which depression is based. So you can't help somebody when he comes into the clinic. And by the way, it's obviously good to accept the patient and accept what they're going through. Obviously. That's step 1 of at least 10 steps. God, that's such a low-grade way of viewing it. Well, all I can really do is when he comes into the clinic every week, all I can really do is accept him. Yeah, that's the stigma. You just answered your own question, dude. God, it's awful. It's a total tragedy, the state of psychology. I mean, in a way, it's good because now I look really smart by comparison because we are coming up with general principles of how our psychology works, how our emotions work, and how those emotions work with decisions and different kind of decisions we can make with each of the emotions. So now I look really smart by comparison, so that's helpful, but it's just awful, the state of the field. Now people absolutely do not get help, and it's nothing to do with stigma and everything to do with psychologists have their head up their butt. Psychologists don't see that this field is going in the direction of phrenology, and it will. If you don't right the ship and start speaking to principles and how we need to build an actual science based on those principles. Which is what we're doing here, so it's already done, but I just can't believe how, the hubris, the pride that detaches you from reality. That's excessive pride. Detachment from reality because of your pride. Because you can't look at your own crap. Ironic, isn't it? The reason why psychology doesn't work, the reason why therapy doesn't work the way that it really needs to, is because of you blaming the stigma. That is ironic. Definitely. Speaking of stigma, speaking of things not working, let's talk about The Rational Man by Rollo Tomassi. I read this book this past week. I have a few thoughts to say about it. Let me do this. I have 2 takeaways and extraneous points, but I think the two takeaways are going to feed into each other. In fact, I think I could talk about this entire book and talk about my point. I have one overall point about the entire book, and of course we're going to dovetail this into where psychology is, where the state of the field of psychology is right now. It's all going to dovetail together, but I think I can talk about this whole book simply by talking about hypergamy or hypergamy. I think it's hypergamy because hypergamy, that doesn't sound right. It's like your arm is extra useless. I have this gammy arm. It's so useless. It's so gammy. It's hypergamy. So I don't think that's it. I think it's hypergamy. The concept of hypergamy, and this is where this book does get things right, and this is why I think it's important for a lot of people to read this book, especially young men who are getting into the idea of how do I navigate myself in this extremely nebulous land of women and dating. Because there's a lot of great principles in this book that are important to understand. I mean, honestly, from my perspective, not to sound like I'm super smart and good with women or anything, but from my perspective, I can't believe guys didn't know any of these. Like hypergamy, the fact that women are always seeking the next best opportunity. Yeah, you know why women are that way with men is because men are that way with reality. Men are that way in other areas, maybe not with women as much, but in our endeavor, in the category of our life in which we do seek out and achieve status, we are like that. It's just wanting more, wanting the next thing. That's good. Hypergamy is good. The fact that women are going to demand more from you, and if they don't get that, if you do not satiate their hypergamous nature, they're going to cheat on you. That's a good thing. I mean, of course. And if you don't understand that, it's good to know you can't just get a girlfriend and just not put any effort in. Right? I mean, that's what love is. I mean, this is what Aristotle talks about. That's what love is. Love is a reaction, an emotional reaction to values that you like. And women want certain values from men. Women want, quote, alpha men, which the rational male talks about. And if she doesn't get it from you, she's going to get it from somebody else. So he gets that right. But the perspective, the understanding that he brings to it is completely off. Now, he doesn't outright say that hypergamy is a bad thing. In fact, he often explicitly says in the book that hypergamy, it's neither bad nor good. It simply is. It's simply how women are, and we have to work with it. But there is this sense, this is the sense where he's talking about hypergamy that, well, it kind of screws guys over, and men are up against the female imperative, and they're kind of victims. I mean, this was a question in the back of my mind reading through this book. Is he going to placate men's unconscious victimhood in this book? And at the beginning of the book, he really doesn't. But then he starts to bring it up a little bit more around page 100, and then maybe page 150, 200 brings up even more. And then by the end, it's a whole victimhood screed against the female imperative, which just says that a lot of our dating norms are dictated by women. Yeah, of course they are. Because women are biologically more valuable, roughly 300 times, biologically speaking, more valuable than women, meaning you could kill 300 men for every one woman, and it wouldn't disrupt the birth rate of that country. So yeah, women are more valuable. They're going to be more likely to dictate our culture, our cultural dating norms. I mean, there are ways around this, of course. I feel like I'm getting off topic here, but I mean, just the concept of hypergamy, it's good to know about. It's good that this book is talking about it, but he does not understand it. He does not bring it into perspective. He doesn't really tell you how to deal with it. He talks about building a healthy frame or a stronger frame, or the person who needs the other person less in a relationship has the more power. Yeah, that's true. That is a fact. That is a what? That is a symptom, but he doesn't talk about the structure of it. Well, how do you develop a frame? He kind of talks about, he doesn't talk about it directly. It kind of just implies that you can just choose to have a frame or choose to not need a woman. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. So guys are getting the right facts, but they're not getting the right how or why or any sort of strategy or any sort of deeper understanding of the issue. And in the long run, it might be even worse. I would almost use it's like taking steroids metaphor. But at least if you take steroids, you can... Okay, so it's like taking steroids for health. It's like taking steroids if you're not a professional baseball player. it will make it seem like you are healthy at first, but your liver is going to blow up when you're 52 and a half. That's what the rational male is. I don't know. Like, I want to say that I like this book, but geez, I don't know. He just like misses so many points. Again, the what is good. So he talks about other, like soulmate being a myth. Yes, soulmate is a myth. And if you're a 20-year-old male and you don't get that, and this is the first time you've heard it, that may be revolutionary. Good. I'm glad you're learning it. You got to learn that stuff. But why did you think that you needed a soulmate in the first place? Is that just something that Disney fed you? You know, funny enough, he's making the same argument that the feminists make. Oh, this is how you're culturally programmed. Oh, it's because you watched Aladdin. That's why you think soulmate's real. No. It's because you have anxiety. So any girl that shows the least amount of attention to you, you're going to latch onto her. Because you don't know how to go out and meet new women. Now, he does talk about that. That's a good. Spinning plates. Okay, that's one way of saying it. I think the way that we say it here on Animus here, like, what's the general goal that I say that men want with women? Get 3 girlfriends. He talks about spinning plates, whatever. That's important to do. And just knowing that you can do that. Like a lot of guys who are 20, I would imagine you can't even fit that into your mind of what's possible. The fact that you could have 3 girlfriends. I couldn't when I was 20. I couldn't do that. So it's maybe helpful to just learn about it. But then he goes and talks about spinning plates and the mechanics behind it. And he seriously says in this book that spinning plates makes you more confident. That's not what spinning plates does. And any guy who's spun plates for more than 2 freaking seconds understands that having 3 girls, it doesn't make you more confident. It maybe give you better perspective. It helps you develop who you are more in relationship with women. But that's only if you're being honest with those, quote, plates. But it doesn't make you more confident. Maybe engender a sense of well-being, perhaps. But confidence? No. Now, where the confidence comes in and is doing the work that you need to get the plate spinning in the first place. So you have to go out and meet women. And in that process, that's where you get the confidence from. Knowing that if one of the plates, quote unquote, falls off, you can go out and get a new one. That's the confidence. The spinning of the plates, not confidence. Not even close. Just as an aside, I remember an old criticism of Jordan Peterson. It went something to the effect of, this is what stupid people think smart people sound like. And I would say the same thing about relative mastery and the rational male. This is what guys who are bad with women think guys who are good with women sound like. Talking about spinning plates. You got to spin plates because that makes you more confident. No, that's not what's going on. And by the way, why are you not talking about the process of going out and getting 3 plates spinning? You're just telling me that it's good. Okay, now there is some value in that, just knowing that that's possible. But what is the mechanism? What is the how? What is the why? What is the deeper understanding of spinning plates? And it just makes this air throughout this entire book a good what? A good fact, a good principle behind women and dating, but no understanding whatsoever behind it. Like, you cannot manufacture desire. You cannot convince a woman to like you. Oh, that's really important to know. It's really important to understand. Like, if you're dating a girl and you kind of feels like you got to force her to come out, or she's flaking on you, okay, it's over. Like, she's not going to like you. It's okay. This is part of it. Go out and get rejected a bunch. But he doesn't really say how to get a girl to like you. Oh, he talks about the difference between alpha and beta. Again, that's a good what. And you have to understand that women do find general attributes attractive in a man, more alpha attributes. But he just talks about alpha and beta like these 2 abstract concepts. And he definitely doesn't say that you're born alpha or born beta. In fact, he says, no, you're not born alpha, you're not born beta. It's something that you can learn. But he just calls it a mindset. Throughout the entire book, he calls it a mindset. That's so unspecific. This is a guy who knows the right things about women and dating, but I don't think he's really been through the trenches working on himself and proving who he is with women. I don't think he's ever really been that successful. He kind of hints at how successful he's been with women. And honestly, it's not that successful. I think from my perspective, why I feel like I can speak on this issue, not because I was ever that successful with women. I mean, there definitely were times when, compared to what most guys go through, I think I was very successful. But I think specifically because I went from getting no woman at all, back when I knew all this stuff, by the way, but I was getting no girlfriends, no date. Like, I couldn't How do you get a girl out on the same place with you at the same time? How do you convince her to do that? Just like, it was completely beyond me. I couldn't, I almost said beneath me. That's perhaps Freudian slip there. It was completely beyond me, which indicated, much of my issue at the time. But then I worked on myself. I looked at some of my issues. I started talking to more women, and I worked my way out of it. And I got to a place where I was way more successful with women, especially compared to what most guys experience, I think. And even then, I went back to going through a dry spell. Like, that happened several times, just these ebbs and flows in my life. And I always got to this place. I'm like, what happened? And then I worked my way back through it. And you know how I didn't work my way back through it? Is by listening to some guy talk vaguely about the difference between alpha and beta males. That would not have helped me at all. If anything, it would have made it worse in the long term, because it would have engendered this implicit belief that either you're born alpha or born beta, and there's nothing really you can do about it. Even though if I was talking to Rollo Tomasi right now, he would say, "What? I never say that in the book." And I would say, "You're right. You don't say that in the book, but geez, that kind of seems like the implication, doesn't it?" Especially when you mix it in what you talk about hypergamy in, not a positive light, even though it's a beautiful thing. The way that we all want more out of our surroundings, we all demand more. So I think there's just a lack of clarification, even though some of the facts are really good. There's just a lack of clarification, a lack of understanding, and this would explain the way that red pill males are now, especially on Twitter that I see. They seem very black or white about everything. This is what we do. I mean, the rational male, it's like the CrossFit of dating. I think CrossFit's good, and if you don't understand principles of lifting or doing squats, go to CrossFit, learn about it. But I actually see CrossFit people, they don't have souls. I mean, they have zombies. It's like they're walking around like they have a cell phone in their hand, but without the cell phone. There's nothing there. It's this vacuous expression, and that makes sense because, fitness and health and losing weight, it's this area of a lot of insecurity for us. So we just want to, break it down to a few rules and, okay, look at the people who go to CrossFit. They're all in shape. I want to look like them. So I'm just going to go there and do whatever they say. And it eventually turns into this thing where it's black and white and just get a strange sensation when you're there. Although overall, CrossFit's been really good. And I can go to the 24-hour fitness here down the street, and there's going to be 6 or 7 power racks, lifting platforms with bumper plates. That's CrossFit. So overall, it's good. Overall, learning these facts from the rational male are good. But if you don't bring a proper understanding to them, you're going to get people who just latch onto it, and it's not going to be good in the long run. Again, like the guy who takes steroids. Looks really good when he's in his 30s, but, what's happening on the inside? I don't want to disparage steroids. There is a way to take them in the correct way. I mean, they get a bad rap, but I'm just saying, given what we think of steroids culturally, let's say you take steroids in an incorrect way, then your liver will blow up when you're 52 and a half. All these good facts again, but just not really understanding them. Talks about communication and conflates it with emotional indulgence. He thinks that all kind of communication is emotional indulgence, or whenever you communicate emotions, it's always going to be in an unattractive way, which I don't know if I can really blame Rollo Tomasi for. That is a popular conception of emotion, of talking about our emotions, what I started off the show talking about. So, that's going to give you a lot of problems later on if you tell men that their emotions are necessarily bad. But this isn't just this book. I mean, this is the whole Stoicism thing going on. So what do you do to be more alpha? Well, just convince yourself that you're the prize, that you're the prince. It's just no understanding of the mechanisms behind your psychology and how alpha is essentially 20 traits. If you got 7 of them, that's good. 5 is good. 7 would be really good. So just look at the traits that you're going to be good at, exaggerate those traits, maybe minimize your weaker traits if you're a smart guy, but you suck at sports. Still work out. It's still good to work out. At least get up to a 150-pound bench press, or at least be able to bench your weight. But you're a smart guy. That's okay. That's just going to be the kind of woman you attract. Some women really like intelligence. I think a lot of women really like intelligence, but not just intelligence. If you're just a nerd, if you're just a brain, obviously women don't like that. You still have to incorporate other attributes. But what are those other attributes? I mean, he keeps coming back to your frame, right? Being less needy, but that comes down to your boundary. That comes down to regulation of emotion, which you're never going to get by just convincing yourself that you have a frame or that you have a boundary, that you have some sort of power. You can't convince yourself you don't need a woman. I don't care how many plates you're spinning. That's not going to help you do it. Looking at what you're avoiding, looking at what you need, going through those issues, getting really serious about that and your weak points. That's where the boundary comes from, the regulation of emotion. But if you just turn away from the emotion, all you're going to do is just adapt certain behaviors that work, but it's not going to lead to a long-term fulfilling relationship. So, boy, there's just a lot of, I agree with everything that he says. All the facts are right. Yeah. Soulmate is a myth, of course. You have to be more alpha than beta. But there's just some parts of the book, getting back to the victimization complex, that the book has been accused of perpetuating, and I think it does. Again, not at first, but as you get on in the book, it kind of wears on you. It's like when you hang out with somebody who really has mental problems. When you first meet them, you're like, oh, this is a normal person. But then after 3 hours, you think, oh, dude, I need to get away from you. That's how I felt reading this book, especially towards the end. He says, yeah, you cannot argue against the feminine imperative, the fact that women's desires control dating morals and conventions. And you can't call it out, and you can't have standards as a man. And you've been given a, quote, raw deal that you've been conditioned to accept as normal. So a lot of this societal conditioning that's keeping you down, that you can't be critical of, and you can't have high standards with women. Like an older guy cannot express that he wants to date a younger woman without being criticized. Let me just say this. I have talked about having standards before on the show, like a couple weeks ago, my How to Get a Girlfriend video, or how to get a girlfriend you actually like. Come up with 7 things and figure out some way to communicate those. Even if it's just, these are 7 things that I want in a girlfriend, and don't communicate them, but just go out and meet girls until you find a girl who has those 7 things. But I have communicated my standards a lot of times with a lot of different girls, and I've pretty much never been criticized for it. If anything, I felt more respected because of it. Because it was honest, and the girls appreciate the honesty. The girls appreciate that you can communicate about what you want in a girl. Now, what Rollo Tomassi does is he talks about how, maybe how guys want younger women, and that's just the law. But he posts that online. Right? So he criticizes women online, and then he gets feedback online from a bunch of red-haired feminists, and he's like, oh, you can't be critical of the feminine parent. No, you can be. And you can reverse it a little bit to your favor. Not totally, because it's just the biological nature of the situation that men are trying to court these things that are around 300 times more valuable biologically than they are. So there's always going to be a little bit of a power imbalance there, especially at first. But I think once you get your boundary, really solidified, it's not a fake boundary, not convincing yourself that you're some kind of prize or you don't need a woman, but really because you've worked on yourself. Women, especially a woman who complements your boundary very well, then you can really flip the feminine imperative script very strongly. And she's way more interested in you than you are in her. But that's not a fake routine. It's from working on yourself, understanding how your emotions work, understanding how to manage your emotions, how to regulate on a decision by decision level. Giving yourself, maybe a couple years to do that. To really get good at communicating, to really get good at being emotionally vulnerable in an attractive way, in a way that makes you 10 times more attractive. Again, going back to why do we like rock stars? Because they're up on stage communicating emotions with a beat, with a melody, with a structure. Well, there's a beat, there's a melody, there's a structure to communicating emotions in, its everyday social interactions. You're going to communicate your emotions in a way, you're going to be honest in a way that most people never are, but people won't even call it emotional. They'll just say, well, Tim, he's a really cool guy, man. just feel comfortable around him. He just feels like a cool dude. That's what they'll say. They're not going to say that you're emotional. When people start calling you emotional, they don't really mean emotional. They mean you're emotional in the wrong way. You're emotionally indulgent, which again, I've already criticized him for that. So yeah, he gets the facts right. And if you don't understand those facts, I guess they're good to know. But God, this is the starting point. I mean, this is like the Wikipedia. How many analogies can I fit in this review of the Rational? I mean, this is the Wikipedia of women and dating information for men. Great place to start, a really bad place to finish. Learn these principles, understand them as best you can, apply them, keep them in mind when you're dating a woman and you're getting to know them. But God, there's way deeper levels to this, guys. I urge you to read The Rational Male. I also urge you to keep reading more and to keep understanding how you work and how your emotions work. I know I've talked about that before in the show. Oh, guys, they get into this and they want to get better with women. That's a lot of guys' forays into their psychology. Maybe it's after a divorce. Maybe it's after a serious breakup. Maybe it's after a long dry spell. Like, God, what's going on? I really got to figure this out. And they think they need to figure women out. That makes the most sense. I got to figure out when I want to, date 3 women a week. That's got to figure women out. And then you realize, don't need to figure women out so much. I need to figure out relationships. Aha. So then you go read books about relationships. And eventually you come to the realization, no, it's about learning who you are. That's what this comes down to. And another way of saying learning who you are is develop a freaking boundary. Manage your emotions. Figure out how your anger works. Figure out how your anxiety works. Now, nobody could really talk about this up until now because nobody's really had a structure for how emotions work until now. You're welcome. Yeah, speaking of that, here's a quotation from the book that I thought was really funny, and I'll end it here. This is what Rollo Tomassi says. If I can construct some step-by-step program, universal template, that men could all follow in order to, quote, kill their inner beta, I'd be rich beyond my wildest dreams. Some step-by-step program. Then he later says, if I don't have that map for you, anyone telling you that they do have that map is trying to sell you something. Well, I think there is a map. I think we've at least have the hints of it here in the show. I was just reading this thinking, yeah, I actually have that map. Am I trying to sell you something? Oh, you better believe I'm trying to sell you something. Of course. What do you think the point of this podcast is? To not just sell you my ideas, but sell you the idea that, yeah, read Rollo Tomassi, learn all these principles about women and hypergamy, and you cannot manufacture desire. Great. That's a very important thing to understand, but you're not going to act it until you manage your emotions. And that's what I want to sell you guys. I want to sell you guys the idea that there's a deeper level to this. And it's not any more it's actually easier, but it's a little bit more, it's actually more simple, but it may be more difficult, a little bit more difficult in the long term, but it's just going to take some awareness, and you can manage your issues with girls without any of this acting. You can actually be yourself. That's what I'm trying to sell you. Like just that feeling of, I mean, I've been there, right? I've been there. Like I said, I've gone through lots of dry spells. I've also gone through a lot of times in my life where my past success, let's just say, was working for me. Like I didn't feel like I had to do anything. And more women in my life than I had time for, literally. And man, it's just like that feeling of just being alone on a Friday night and like, how do I get a girl out on a date? Like, that's an interesting thing. I think if I asked my mom to meet me at a bar, she might meet me at a bar. Okay, so I could do that. So how does this work? But that's like a real feeling of loneliness that I think a lot of guys go through. And I've definitely gone through it. And I've come out of it. And I never came out of it by thinking about these principles. You know how I got out of it? It's because I started to realize, I might have this thing going on with me called anxiety. Now, even though I had no real palpable symptoms of anxiety, like I didn't have an anxiety problem, never had any real social anxiety issues, to be honest. But maybe there's this thing called anxiety, because I was in class the other day and boy, there's this really attractive girl there. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just couldn't talk to her. Oh, it's not the social convention. Yeah, but I don't know. I wanted to talk to her, but I couldn't. So how about I just work on that area of my life? Not just talking to that girl, but whatever anxiety that causes me. How about I work on that? How about I treat it as this separate part of me and I work on that thing? And then 6 months later, things start to happen. Women start to react to you in a different way. More FaceTime in front of women, and one thing leads to another, and it's not from, oh, women are hypergamous and you got to act like you're the prize. I never acted like I was the prize. I acted like a guy who was seriously trying to work on himself. Going out, being honest with women, giving them a sincere compliment, and some of them would just say, oh, thank you, that's really nice. But every once in a while, one would kind of grab your arm and go, wait, where are you going? What? No, you seem cool. You seem nice. Come talk to me. And then it just, you become more comfortable with this process. And then you wake up 6 months later, maybe a couple years later, and you're like, what happened? What happened to that lonely feeling? Yeah, soulmates don't exist, I guess. But, focusing on that and how I could have been brainwashed by watching Aladdin when I was 5, how I could have been brainwashed by that doesn't really seem to get at the root of the issue, even though that may be a good fact to know. All right, guys. That's my review of the Rational Male. Let's get to these questions. What ways do I recommend calming down in the short term? I get it. You have to work on your anxiety in the long term. So let's say you have an anxiety problem. What do people say? Oh, just go for a run. Go for a run when you feel stressed. That solves the problem. It doesn't. It just masks it with endorphins in the short term, but it really doesn't solve why you were unable to manage the stress or the threats coming in your life in the first place. So what ways are there of calming down? Should you even try to calm down in the short term? What else does he say here? Yeah, I'm calming down. If think of ways, calming down in the short term, I think is great. So what do I have here? Breathing, working out, developing some mantra. I think that's fine if you need to calm down in the short term, especially if you're out in public at work, you're in a stressful meeting, just do things that you can do to help yourself calm down. But as a long-term solution, that's the only way I criticize these things. So yeah, breathing, working out, going for a run, I think that can be great. Do I have any extra tips? No. I don't know. There's a bunch online. That's the problem. There's a bunch of tips online on how to manage stress in the short term. Oh, you get stressed, take a cold shower. Taking a cold shower helps. Doing breath holds. There's like a breathing technique that you can do. Now, the one I've talked about in the past is just in for 2 breaths, maybe a slight hold, and then out for 2 breaths, or out for 2 seconds. What did I say? Breaths? No, seconds. In for 2, and then out for 2. And that's a good way to calm down, just a little bit in the short term. There's different kinds of breathing techniques. I have no problem with that. I just have a problem with that being the end. Again, like the Rational Male. It's a great first step, but there's 10 steps there. If you need to calm down in the short term, do it. But there's a deeper issue there. This is about suppression, right? Putting an issue in the back burner, like you're nervous in a sales meeting. I'm going to bring this up later. Not now. Probably not good to do it at a sales meeting. That's the example that I give, but later. Prayer. If you have a God, pray to your God. That's a great way to relieve stress in the short term. I think that's a great way to do it. Whatever you think God is, I have my conception of what God is, reality. But whatever your religion and whatever your religious moral precepts are, pray to that. That has been shown to work very well. Giving yourself some mantra just to remind yourself of. I think that's great. But if that's all you do, then that's a problem. That's repression and not suppression. Another question here about, right? Is that it? Is that what you? Yeah, just anything else you see online is fine. But again, just want to make sure I answer that fully. The next question is about whether collectivism and cognitive behavioral therapy are related, since both psychology departments, a lot of them, they recommend cognitive behavioral therapy, but they're built on collectivism. No, well, are they related? I mean, yeah, they could be related because in some respect, we understand that CBT doesn't work. So it kind of implies that collectivism is the truth, that we can't really develop our boundaries based on what we want. So how are these related? I mean, I guess you could think of it as like concentric circles of error in psychology. So I think sociology, the ineptitude of individualism, the fact that you cannot develop your boundary on your own, the fact that you have your thoughts about women and dating because you watched Aladdin when you were 5, and we're all just products of our social construction, things like that. That is like at the center. That's at the center of error in a lot of academia. And a lot of people talk to that. You know, I'm not the only one who talks about the ridiculousness of those notions, like Heterodox Academy. You know, there's a lot of good therapists online, but they're all kind of behavioral therapy. So I think on the outer ring of, outer concentric ring of error in psychology academia is CBT. And these things are mostly unrelated, I would say, but, you know, CBT is just a way of not really dealing with the issue at hand. Right, not really dealing with what we started off talking about this episode, what we talked about throughout the episode, really relating with the rational male, and pretty much what we talk about every episode. It's not really dealing with the issue at hand. So if you don't deal with the issue at hand, I think I've talked about this before, actually, now that I'm reminding myself of it. When you don't deal with the issue at hand, what is collectivism? It is essentially a projection of dysregulation. It's like this feeling of oppression that you get from society, and you're just the product of your socioeconomic class or whatever skin color you are. Right? Identity politics, that's really popular now. But where does it? Yeah, it really comes from anxiety. This oppression that you project out to be the patriarchy, to be white supremacy. It's usually anxiety. So when the cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't manage the anxiety in the correct way, when it just covers up the symptoms, when you feel stressed out and your cognitive behavioral therapist goes, oh, go for a run. Look at this study. It shows that running reduces stress. Well, just go for a run. It's science. It's evidence-based. You're not really getting at the issue. When you don't really get the emotional issue, we tend to do crazy things with these latent emotional issues that go unrecognized, and we start coming up with crazy things like the patriarchy or white supremacy, even though all evidence points to the contrary. Doesn't matter. You're going to come up with, you know, like what's just been debunked in the last year or two, a stereotype threat. You know, that was one rationalization for your anxiety. Well, that one didn't seem to work out. Science is coming back on that. Kind of difficult to replicate that one, like every other sociological study ever. We'll come up with more. Because it's not about a real theory about the patriarchy or anything like that. It's about you coming out with some kind of expression for, you know, some kind of projection for your anxiety, like all conspiracy theories. That's why conspiracy theories are really popular right now. Got the second issue of Animus. If you want to learn more about conspiracy theories and where they come from. I know there's been a bunch of articles recently about conspiracy theories and how they're just like religion and everything. But what we go talk about in the second issue of Animus, it goes way deeper. And I was saying it way before everybody else. Not to brag, not to pump myself up, but I was. And I was coming up with a better explanation for it too. So yeah, I think that's how they are related, if they could be related. Yeah, CBT doesn't manage emotions. A lot of collectivism, the main, the center point, the inner concentric circle of error in modern day psychology, it results from being unable to manage emotions. I think if we had a better way of managing emotions in this country, a lot of, you know, it's not just making fun of the left or anything, but the right does a lot of crazy things too. They have a lot of silly beliefs and conspiracy theories. I think a lot of that, if we really got way better mental health in this country, way better mental health treatments, not just blaming people for, oh, it's just because there's a stigma. If we just got rid of the stigma, but if we actually had principles on which we could develop a real science, if we understood that the way that psychology is going now, as I always say, The way it's going now, it's going the way of phrenology. If we really understood that and developed principles on which we could form the science of psychology and therapy, then a lot of these crazy beliefs, collectivism being one of them, would just not happen. It would still be around, sure, because there are those intellectual defenses of it, sure, but the extent that we get all wrapped up and we get really vitriolic about all this, that would definitely go away. All right, and now we have another question. This will be the last one. This is from YouTube, my YouTube video this week. This guy has a Nassim Taleb quotation from Anti-Fragility, and it says that there's a long quotation. I'm just going to focus on this part. Stoicism is about domestication, not necessarily the elimination of emotions. And he's asking what I think about this. Yeah, I think there are Stoics now, people who call themselves Stoics, who look at what Marcus Aurelius and Seneca wrote, and they come up with a more advanced, a more enlightenment view of Stoicism. And maybe they would say something like that. But that's not what Stoicism was based on initially. And when I was talking about in that video, is that CBT was based on Stoicism, like the old Stoic teachers. That's where Albert Ellis got a lot of his influence from, and it's definitely arguable that Albert Ellis is what started CBT. I mean, Aaron Beck gets credit for it because he was the first one to call it CBT, but before that it was cognitive therapy or rational therapy, which later became rational motive behavioral therapy, which is what Albert Ellis is known for. Look, maybe that's what Stoics are talking about now, but it's not what Stoicism is based on. Stoicism is definitely based on the tenet of tuning out from your environment. Only your inner state matters. Don't get upset. If you're anxious, it's stupid to get anxious. Just push that away and go to your happy place. And that's the final solution to emotions and feeling miserable. It's the fact that you care. Well, that's a tuning out of the environment. Now, maybe some Stoics are coming around and saying that it's good to domesticate your emotions, not eliminate them, which I would agree with. But even if Stoics are saying that, this goes back to the rational male, what's the process for doing that? What is the process for doing that? If you don't have a process, if you don't have the materials through which you can domesticate emotions without eliminating them, then I have to say, even if you say that, that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. It's like, so what? So I drew a picture of a time machine. I could think of the idea of a time machine. But unless I have the right materials and the right construction of a time machine, then you're not going to travel through time. So just because you like the idea of traveling through time and you kind of talk about it in some abstract way and, draw some kind of picture, it doesn't mean it's going to work. You have to come up with a structure for domesticating your emotions. An exact structure, exactly what goes on. Because any kind of accidental elimination of emotion could come back to bite you in the ass 10, 15 years later. Sir, maybe Stoics say that now, but just saying it's one thing. I talked with that guy about positive psychology a couple years ago, and he was talking about positive psychology 2.0. Well, no, it's not just about having positive thoughts. It is about domestication of emotions in a sense, like understanding that you are sad, you do get angry, and that is okay. Great. You can say that, and you can draw a freaking picture of a time machine. Well, what do you build it with? Oh, look, it's like flux capacitor. Oh, now we have the solution for time travel. No, it's just a stupid prop in a movie. It doesn't mean anything unless you can deconstruct it step by step, unless you have blueprints of it. If you want blueprints for your psychology, Animus, AnimusEmpire.com. Go watch all the videos about, or read my ebook at the store. I forget what the URL is. Just go to AnimusEmpire.com. There's a store there. There's our group therapy that we have, group therapy sessions online. That's /group, individual therapy unconscious map. Not only have I deconstructed emotions, but I deconstructed therapy to its fundamental working parts. And then with that, the course, if you don't want to do therapy with me, I teach you essentially what I do in an unconscious map in our individual therapy and the specific goal to therapy, what we're all trying to get out of therapy. There is one goal for therapy for everybody, and it's probably more specific than you would think. And I think we have one more question. No, that's it. I don't have any more questions. Oh, no, I have one more question here. I'll get to it next week, but I need more now. Animus at animusempire.com. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching on YouTube. And I, of course, wish you all the pain and all the joy that comes from being in touch with reality.